short recording takes a look at patient and public involvement, or PPI as it's sometimes known, on trial governance committees in health research. It was originally developed to help provide an introduction to PPI for those taking up placements on those committees, and funded by the Health Research Board, Trials Methodology Research Network, Ireland. As you visit and sit in one of these meetings, these trial governance committee meetings, you're likely to come across patients and or members of the public sitting as members of that trial governance and wonder what they're doing there. As somebody who sat in those groups, I have to say, I too used to wonder what I was doing sitting there. The confusion that did exist happens less these days. So it might be worth exploring what this active patient and public involvement looks like in this context. Patient public involvement in health research is increasingly part of the health policies in many countries throughout the world. It is often advised or recommended as good practice. To me, it seems both right and proper that if we're doing health research with people rather than to them, the perspectives, experiences, and insights can help inform, shape, and form not just individual trials, but address matters in trial governance, the culture of how research is organised, approved, and funded. Much of it happens with individual studies, with single researchers or research teams, rather than on the governance. And it's about improving the relevance, improving the language in things like patient information leaflets. But it also can offer advice on where you might recruit people and how to go about it, how to communicate. And increasingly, we're seeing this involvement in trial management. The first and foremost, I think, for me is about it being genuine, that people are being listened to and involved in a discussion. You can describe it as a culture of partnership that feels and appears cooperative. Secondly, I think is about clarity about the role. What is the person doing there? And has it been discussed with the whole group? You might have a chat about what are people's expectations on both sides. So for an example, if I think you want my story, then I'll just tell you chronologically what happened. But actually, what you probably want are my insights. Thirdly, I think it's about the purpose. I think we're there to help the whole committee consider what it's going to be like for those who take part in the study, those participants, and think what the findings in future might mean to patients, their carers, and members of the public. It's not just about being the patient sitting at the table and going, well, we've got a patient representative or a public partner or contributor, whatever we want to call them. And they will be called different things. But I think some of those contributions are about asking about, are there any health inequalities that might be exposed through doing this study? I think we're there to also raise awareness about equality, diversity, inclusion. I think there's something about monitoring and reviewing the patient and public involvement. What might we have done better? What could we do in future? And then lastly, in this one, I think it's about, I have a different network of people I mix with than a researcher. So when we bring those together, then actually that feels much better. I think fourth, I have just one more after this. I think it's focusing in the sort of tasks we do right? If you ask me particular questions and focus on areas that need help from my perspective, it might be recruitment, retention, ongoing communication with study participants, writing updates, preparing plain language summaries, the results, looking at a poster. I mean, bless researchers, I think it's wonderful, but you do all this trial governance and you write it up at the end, and it's almost as if, can you squeeze as many words into a poster? How does it look? How does it feel? How do people read it? And then publications. So that combination of purpose and tasks. And last, there's something about giving people an opportunity to reflect on how it's going. I think we put somebody on a committee and we don't stop to say, how's it going? Is the involvement working? Can we be honest with each other and say, do you know what, Derek, thanks very much, but we think you know too much. We need somebody who knows less, or we want somebody who's, got experience in this particular area. Fine, let's be honest with each other. So it's that having meeting beforehand, regular reviews. So it's that learning and reflection. We're dealing with people. There are always difficulties, right? I think there's something in this about, if you look at those list of things I talked about and go through those, you'll find it's usually one of those where something hasn't been spoken about or we remain unclear, which is why I think the review of behaviours and using those features is quite a good way. I think the earlier you address a problem, the better. I often says, I don't know your word, and therefore I don't know what I don't know. And unless somebody says to me, excuse me, Derek, it's a great question, but it's the wrong place to ask it. Derek, that's a really interesting point, but it's got nothing to do with this research. So unless somebody tells me, I won't know. So I think it's those, when you see something, and it doesn't have to be in the meeting. Sometimes it's the end of the meeting, walking along a corridor. You know that question, you might like to think about that. Because I will also be using that time to say, do you know that discussion about such a, what was meant by that? Because that way we both learn from it. I think it's also worth noting that I think sometimes people think when we talk about things like co-production, right, that I'm there to do your job, right? I'm there to become a complex analyst, an expert in surrogate outcomes. No, that's your job, right? If you took it something like guiding complex analysis, that's not what I'm there to get involved with. But I might have an opinion on how the information for such analysis gets collected, interpreted, and communicated. It's the difference between what the complex analysis is and what it does and might mean. Those are the pinch points on which actually you want to have the patient involvement, right? And on the trial governance committee, I might not know what the complex analysis has been and how they've done it, but I might be saying, excuse me, so what does that mean for the patient who's going to be given the results? That's the kind of difference that's important. Christina Staley produced a work a few years ago on the impact of patient and public involvement. And she usefully described the benefits as on being on the research and on the people. And I think when we divide it up, so I've alluded to some of these already, but the research, I think, becomes more relevant, real life, it becomes explained in plain language and hopefully reaches those who most need it. And that is helped by talking to, and we talk a lot about patient and public involvement in general. It's just a series of conversations. Keep it as simple as possible. And talking to those who are intended to benefit. So in terms of trial governance, it's about keeping an eye on what it means for the research participants. So the extra visits to the hospital, the more forms, the more tests, the more blood that needs to be taken. Is that going to mean that ultimately people are not going to stay on the trial? Because if they drop off the trial, we don't get the statistical numbers we need. So can you anticipate some of these things? Could it be wrapped into a regular hospital visit rather than hospital visit on Tuesday? Oh, I've got to get back on Thursday for the research. Practical, but it makes a huge difference to patients. So, and as for people, so that's the research, as to people, it's that mutual nature of gain for the researchers and for the patient and public partners. I think, because I think we're still looking at this, I think researchers become more aware of the potential impact. I think they become better communicators. They're certainly more grounded in reality and focused on the need when we see good patient and public. And that's what we'd want to see on the trial governance. It's a remembering why we do research. It's not, Ian Chalmers says this, research is for public good, not for careers. No? The patient partner who comes in, and I've used the word public partner, patient, but it's used differently. It doesn't matter. The person who's not the researcher. I think we gain knowledge and understanding about the methods that are used. We also learn more about health issues in general and what they mean. We often get a chance to develop skills as giving presentations or writing papers, or just the confidence of debating and discussing with researchers and medics. And that helps you when you go back to your own consultations with your GP. And then, of course, we're talking here often about trials methodology. And I think it adds another string to our bow because we're improving all research. And I think we become advocates for the highest quality research, for using real world evidence. And I think we become more informed people. And I think healthier as a result. So I don't particularly like, and a lot of other patients don't like the idea of training. It sounds as if we're being made to be more like you. And so I prefer the word learning, because the training aspect of that's your job. I do, however, need to be able to learn enough about what you do to be able to join in. Since I started putting notes together on this, I started to change my mind a wee bit. And I'm thinking that it's about thinking of a travel guide, not the whole history book. Think of a phrase book, not a dictionary. I'm coming to visit France for a day, not to live there permanently. So if I think that way, so what do I need to know as a minimum? But more importantly, what are my questions and how can you answer those? Then what is that I'm doing there about the purpose? I think just to say to those who are going to take up the placements, think about when you're going to set up your own trials. This is an opportunity to develop leadership skills, not just to sit in and look at what's going on. So you will hear the voices and people being actively involved on these committees in a way that is meaningful, add values, and is beneficial. But when you're developing your own studies, how are you going to do that? What do you want to see working? How will it affect your work? And that's the opportunity that's been given. It is a great opportunity to learn about what's going on across the island of Ireland through the work of the Health Research Board Trials Methodology Research Network. And I am very grateful for them giving me this opportunity to talk today.